Miles was 13 when he first heard the whispers, barely a sentence, half a warning, shared between two older Zalarian maintenance drones in the subreactor corridor. Asterisk. Containment status, unstable. Drake-born anomaly still alive. Asterisk. That phrase alone dug deep into his imagination, stoking fires of curiosity stronger than any school module. He'd grown up in the colony on Yeltrax 9, far from what remained of Earth. His parents had been data engineers, long lost in a freighter incident, leaving him a ward of the colony's structured care program. The only thing he had left of them was a synthetic fox plush and an appetite for disobedient wonder. Forbidden zones existed everywhere on Yeltrax 9, ancient bunkers, fossilized battlefields, old containment labs. One such location lay behind the lower wildlands near the oxygen farms, sealed by layered force fields and signage only half maintained. After hearing the phrase, Miles couldn't let it go. He slipped away after the third dust bell, past biometric checkpoints he'd learned to bypass with falsified temporal credentials stolen off a drowsy patrol drone. The air near the forbidden lab hung thicker, cooler. Wind didn't whistle here. Everything seemed suspended in time. Inside, the facility was cracked and broken, vines snaking through shattered walls, a lingering scent of ozone and rust trailing through the dark corridors. He found the chamber purely by instinct, down a corridor etched with warnings in 3 dialects, a biometric lock shorted out decades ago. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. Something big breathed softly behind a veil of shadows. It wasn't what he expected. Not a monster. Not some slavering beast in chains. It was curled tight, coiled like a cat made of obsidian and night flame. Scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, thin and fractured. The creature was hurt, its wings clipped crudely with fused metal restraints, one leg bleeding from a rusted clamp. Tubes once meant to sedate or feed it hung limp, long dried. The word Drakeborn was etched on the far wall in fading xenoglyphs. Beneath it, one line in human standard, do not feed. Dangerous. Asterisk asterisk. But its eyes, 2 shifting galaxies, purple and ember gold, opened slowly to him. It didn't roar. It didn't growl. It only watched. Miles couldn't explain what compelled him to move closer. He had half a ration bar in his coat and a small water capsule. The creature, no, the being, sniffed cautiously, then nudged the offerings with something close to reverence. It ate slowly, not ravenously. When it finished, it lowered its head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. He left that night shaken but unable to forget. No alarms triggered. No one knew. The next night he returned, this time with stitched protein packs, spliced from algae fields. The creature waited. Still wary, still unmoving, but no longer afraid. Miles spoke softly as he offered food. Ruck, he said. That's what I'll call you. Over the next days, Miles' behavior shifted. He paid more attention to how security drones moved. He used scavenged lenses to scan for electromagnetic pulses. His entire mind rerouted itself around maintaining this secret. Ruck never spoke, but responded. When Miles reached too quickly, it recoiled. When he knelt, Ruck inched closer. A silent agreement settled between them, neither predator nor prey, but something new, uncertain, tenuous. Miles accessed colony records in secret. He found declassified fragments from the Second Rift War, notes about engineered creatures used as psychic shock troops, bred to destabilize civilizations with fear auras and directed fury. Drakeborn were their apex. Supposedly eradicated. None were meant to remain. But here Ruck was, living, breathing, not acting on that programming. Still, warnings whispered through Miles' mind. There had to be a reason they left a being like this to rot. Maybe it had done something terrible. Maybe it wasn't broken, just waiting. And yet, every interaction pushed that fear deeper down. One night, Miles lingered longer than he should have. Ruck extended a clawed hand, slow, deliberate, and traced a shape in the dust. A spiral. Then a dot at the center. Miles didn't understand, but he recognized intention. Communication. Perhaps language. Perhaps memory. Back at the colony, he overheard new talk, proximity sensors detecting fluctuating energy near the old wildlands. Patrols were being rerouted. Drones were testing atmospheric disturbances. Someone suspected unauthorized biosignatures. Miles stopped eating regularly. His sleep was shallow. Every day brought greater risk. But stopping never crossed his mind. Something in him had changed. He wasn't sure if Ruck was a weapon or a prisoner. He didn't know if feeding it violated some ancient security protocol or was an act of unspoken justice. But each time he saw that faint glow in the dark, those eyes that watched not with hunger, but with awareness, he understood something that colony data had never taught him. Even monsters left in chains can hunger for more than blood. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can offer them is kindness. Ruck waited each night now. It never moved from its space in the shattered containment chamber, but as soon as Miles entered, its gaze would follow him with precise, unblinking attention. The food exchanges turned ritualistic. Ruck no longer sniffed or hesitated, it accepted what was offered, not with desperation, but deliberate restraint. Its wounds, though deep, showed signs of recovery. The scaled flesh had begun sealing itself at an unnatural pace, veins pulsing faintly with iridescent current. Miles noted every change, cataloging them in a hidden slate pad using vague terms to avoid raising suspicion. By the 8th day, the creature responded to his voice. No words, but it would move slightly, nostrils flaring when he spoke. It began imitating his motions, tilts of the head, raises of the hand. When he sat cross-legged, Ruck mirrored the posture, folding its limbs with awkward symmetry. Miles laughed once when it tried to mimic a stretch and knocked over a broken support beam. Ruck froze, as if waiting for punishment. Instead, Miles grinned. That moment changed something invisible between them. During daylight, Miles scavenged more food, disguised supply requisitions, and rerouted maintenance logs to mask his visits. He used fragments of the old colony net to dig into historical records, extracting fragments of reports on the Drake-born, biosynthetic entities built for planetary siege, capable of environmental camouflage, high-frequency mind influence, and kinetic phase leaps. Yet nothing described behavior like this. No report mentioned mimicry, no tactical logs recorded deference to children. The documents painted Drake-born as programmed instincts housed in monstrous shells. But Ruck's behavior conflicted with every file. He started experimenting. Brought small objects, a broken mirror shard, a heat crystal, an old toy prism. Ruck examined each with careful precision, holding them with its talons like a surgeon with scalpels. It placed them in symmetrical patterns, adjusted them when disturbed, and once rearranged the items after Miles had set them down randomly. There was intention behind every movement. More impressive was the creature's growing awareness of his emotions. When Miles arrived once with a bruised arm after tripping in a restricted corridor, Ruck approached for the first time. It didn't touch him, but exhaled a vapor stream that numbed the pain in minutes. Its breath had chemical properties, tailored for healing. That detail wasn't in any record either. One night, Miles tested a boundary. He reached slowly and touched Ruck's forelimb, rough, warm, thrumming with quiet power. Ruck tensed, but didn't retreat. Its skin vibrated faintly, like it was absorbing information through contact. Miles held still, his palm flat against the creature's scale. It blinked once, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time made a low resonant sound. A pulse. Not a growl. Something closer to a response. But the danger of discovery escalated. Patrols began random checks near the oxygen fields. A crash sensor drone lay not far from the lab, its last reading corrupted by interference spikes. Miles rerouted surveillance timestamps and faked an atmospheric anomaly report, buying time. He was playing with systems far beyond his clearance level. Every success came with sharper risk. He couldn't explain to anyone why he kept going. He told himself it was curiosity, then obligation. But deep down he knew, it was belief. Ruck wasn't a dormant weapon. It wasn't some unpredictable monster. It was choosing not to be dangerous. That distinction, that quiet restraint, was proof of something no alien report could quantify, free will. Still, cracks formed in his confidence. During one visit, Ruck demonstrated a new behavior. It shimmered, vanished from sight for a full 4 seconds, and reappeared directly behind Miles without sound. Miles spun in panic, but Ruck backed away instantly, curling low, chest pulsing as if distressed by his fear. That night, Miles didn't sleep. If Ruck wanted to end him, there would be no warning. Was it testing boundaries, or failing to understand fear? He returned the next day with a new approach. He didn't speak. He didn't move toward Ruck. He simply placed food and sat in silence. Ruck didn't eat. It watched. Then, in a moment that seemed impossible, it used the tip of one talon to carve a circle in the dirt, followed by 3 vertical lines inside it. Miles recognized the symbol. It was part of a forgotten Earth dialect, Old Sol Signum, once used in deep space trade routes. It meant kin. The question wasn't whether Ruck could understand. It was how much it remembered, and from where. Suddenly, the Drakeborn wasn't just sentient. It had history. Possibly memory. Possibly guilt. Back at the colony, whispers grew louder. A command briefing circulated through secondary nodes. Unconfirmed biological irregularities near the restricted sector. Commanders debated deploying neural scramblers. Miles deleted the copy before it reached his housing unit. Every instinct screamed to stop, to step away. But when he thought of Ruck, the careful mimicry, the effort to understand, the pause before every action, he couldn't accept that it was all facade. If the colony believed danger was measured by species, then maybe they were wrong. Maybe what made something dangerous wasn't its design, but what it did when no one was watching. They found the breach on the 12th night. A patrol drone registered a null zone near the wildlands. No thermal reading, no kinetic signatures, just absence. That level of silence usually meant only one thing: cloaking tech, or something powerful enough to bend ambient energy around itself. Command dispatched a stealth team, equipped with pulse disruptors and neural dampeners. Miles only learned about it after spotting a black-clad silhouette through the lab's cracked roof as he approached. He dropped flat, hard hammering, watching as 3 Zalarians swept the ruins, scanning with devices that pulsed pale red. He wasn't fast enough to warn Ruck. The soldiers entered. Silence followed. Then a rumble. The sound didn't echo, it vibrated. Miles crawled closer and saw Ruck coiled, not attacking, but protecting something behind it. They shouted orders. One soldier aimed. Ruck didn't strike. Instead, it stepped between the weapon and a wall. When the trigger was pulled, Ruck shielded itself with a wing, letting the energy pulse impact without retaliation. Miles burst into the open screaming, drawing their attention. One soldier advanced, but Ruck growled, a sound of restraint more than rage. They didn't fire again. Ruck held its ground, breathing slow, eyes locked not on them, but on Miles. The team reported what they saw but didn't press further. Their notes marked the entity as non-aggressive but uncontainable. Command decided to escalate. Miles was pulled in for questioning 2 hours later. They didn't accuse, just asked what he'd seen, how often he went outside the quadrant, if he'd interacted with fauna. He lied smoothly, child-level vagueness, backed by a scatter of logs he'd faked earlier. They didn't press harder, but he was placed under surveillance and confined to his residential pod. That night, the lock disengaged on its own. Not with force, digitally. Ruck had returned, and somehow interfaced with the pod's access system, bypassing protocols without alerting security. Miles stepped outside to find it standing still in the shadows, waiting. It hadn't followed him out of rage or need, it had come to ensure he wasn't harmed. They stared at each other in silence. Miles realized then, Ruck had let them live. It could have disappeared. Could have killed. Instead, it had chosen restraint. Again. Back inside, he hacked the Loter neural logs tied to the old lab's original database. Deeper access this time, using encryption pulled from forgotten administrator keys. He uncovered one archived visual feed, unindexed, corrupted at the edges. It showed a containment base centuries ago. A Drakeborn stood not in a cage, but beside a woman, a human, armored, bloodied, yet smiling. She raised a hand to its snout. The timestamp matched the tail end of the Rift War. Less than a minute later, the feed ended with a facility lockdown alert. Miles stared at the freeze frame for hours. Ruck had seen humans before, and remembered them. But something else emerged, keywords buried in the maintenance logs, *VYRN star. A hostile hive species native to unstable systems beyond the trade routes. Long thought extinct, but recent sensor data showed trace biological patterns matching dormant VYRN clusters. Their method was always the same: locate old war assets, hijack them through resonant mind beacons, and use them to ignite planetary chaos. Miles dug into active colony updates. One line stood out in a recent threat bulletin. Unverified subether pulses detected in the southern atmospheric grid. Possible VYRN origin. The VYRN hadn't just stumbled into Yeltrax 9. They had come to reclaim what was left of the past. And Ruck was part of that inventory. But the beacon hadn't activated. Not yet. Which meant they were either close or still calibrating. Either way, the countdown had started. He returned to the old facility to check on Ruck, slipping past patrols using timed gaps and pulse disruptor decoys. Ruck was uneasy, its body shifted constantly, breathing staggered. Miles moved closer. Ruck's talons scratched into the wall again, not symbols this time, but patterns, repetitive, fractal, almost involuntary. He saw what it meant: a signal was trying to reach Ruck, and it was resisting. But resistance came at a cost. Ruck dropped suddenly, a tremor running through its frame. Miles ran forward and placed a hand against its neck. The hum was stronger than before, like two forces clashing beneath its skin. He left quickly and returned with a portable jammer, the kind used to block illegal transmissions in trade hubs. It wasn't strong, but it created interference. He placed it near Ruck. The tremors slowed. For now, the signal was blocked. Back at the colony, the leadership prepared for a full lockdown. They suspected external threat, but not the method. They hadn't connected the pieces. Miles had. The VYRN were near. Ruck was the target. And if the beacon ever connected, what little piece Yeltrax 9 had would shatter in hours. And still, Ruck chose to fight the pull. Not because it had to, but because it remembered something stronger than instinct. Something human. Miles escaped confinement using a bypass protocol embedded in the water filtration system, an overlooked vulnerability he'd noticed during maintenance drills. He left no trace. By the time the alert reached security, he was already in the outer sectors, running toward the lowlands with a field disruptor and the colony's last working empathy amplifier. Every second mattered. The neural beacon had activated. Ruck was already affected. The creature's breathing had deepened into sharp rhythmic bursts, movement erratic. A low-pitched hum vibrated through the air like a warning bell. The beacon wasn't calling, it was commanding. Ruck clawed at the ground, carving deep trenches in the metal floor, its restraint visibly cracking. Miles didn't speak. He placed the amplifier beside him and activated the interface. The device, designed for interspecies therapy, wasn't built for anything like this, but it was his only option. He sat down, locked his gaze onto Ruck, and initiated the link. The world collapsed into static. Flashes of memory, burnt skies, screams in alien tongues, fires cutting through gravity wells, rushed into Miles' mind. Not his thoughts. Ruck's. Every image etched in desperation. Miles forced focus. The amplifier needed emotional clarity to sync. He projected one memory, the first night, the moment he'd placed food in front of the creature without flinching. The echo pushed back against the pulse. The beacon flickered. Ruck stopped shaking. But the connection had consequences. Miles' neural readings spiked. His chest tightened, heart rate erratic. Blood vessels behind his eyes throbbed. Still, he pushed the memory again. This time stronger, accompanied by the feeling that had driven him: trust, not fear. Choice, not programming. Ruck responded with its own image, Miles standing between it and the soldiers, arms raised, unarmed. Then came the breach. The VYRN swarm descended not as a mass but as a coordinated strike, thin-limbed, silent, networked. They moved through the colony perimeter without triggering alarms, nullifying defense grids through coordinated frequency jamming. Panic erupted in seconds. Drones failed. Gates shattered. They weren't hunting the colony. They were isolating Ruck. Miles severed the amplifier link and bolted toward the nearest launch bay, grabbing a beacon pike on the way. Ruck followed, low to the ground, breathing steady but distant, like it was still halfway under control. The creature didn't fly. It walked. Measured, watching the shadows. At the colony's core tower, chaos unfolded. The VYRN had breached 3 tiers and disabled Central Command. No one expected physical resistance. Miles arrived amid confusion and fear, the young boy dragging a creature the colony feared more than anything. Soldiers shouted. A standoff formed. But then the VYRN appeared, emerging from the walls, from the ceiling, from ruptured ground. The colony fired. It wasn't enough. The VYRN moved in patterns too fast to target, designed for infiltration, not war. They used confusion as cover, dragging citizens away in seconds. Ruck didn't wait. It roared, not with anger, but with pure sound, a resonant wave that fractured 3 VYRN before the rest recalibrated. Then it moved. The colony saw what Miles already knew. Ruck didn't kill without precision. It intercepted attacks, redirected strikes, shielded vulnerable targets. Every move deliberate. Controlled. But the beacon pulse returned, stronger this time. Ruck staggered mid-fight. The VYRN had adapted, tuning the signal to match the empathy amplifier's frequency. They were turning Ruck's own connection against it. Miles ran toward the central relay where the signal fed through. He climbed the collapsed communications spire, manually forcing the override on the pulse regulator. With a beacon pike in hand, he thrust it into the core, shorting the signal. Electricity surged through him. He collapsed, unconscious for seconds. When he woke, the pulse was gone. Ruck stood above him, eyes no longer flickering. Around them, the swarm faltered. Without the beacon, their coordination failed. The colony's defense systems rebooted. Automated drones descended from orbit. The counter-assault began. Ruck didn't rejoin the fight. It stood back, body torn and scorched, watching the VYRN retreat. One final burst from the colony's orbital rail tore through the remaining invaders, scattering what was left into ash. In the silence that followed, no one spoke. Soldiers didn't approach. Civilians didn't flee. The creature they feared had saved them. Ruck looked at Miles one last time. The acknowledgement held no ceremony, just truth. Then it vanished, body folding into space, dispersing like mist. The battle was over. But nothing in the colony would ever return to what it was. Not the perception of safety, nor the belief that monsters could be understood only by the shadows they cast. The aftermath was quiet in ways the colony hadn't experienced before. No emergency drills, no alarm tones, just silence filled with the weight of what everyone had seen. The command center declassified footage of the breach. Every citizen could watch as the creature once labeled a living weapon defended them with precision and intent. There was no denial, no manufactured spin. The truth was clear, the threat had not come from Ruck. But not everyone saw it the same way. Among the colony's leadership, a divide emerged. Some argued that Ruck had responded under duress, manipulated or momentarily deflected from its programming. Others, mostly civilians and a few security personnel who had witnessed the restraint firsthand, insisted that it had made conscious choices, protective, strategic, not reactive. A debate unfolded quietly across data forums and encrypted message boards. Could a creature engineered for destruction reject its purpose, or was it just delaying the inevitable? The governing body avoided answering. Instead, they focused on reinforcing defenses, rebuilding damage, and initiating a planet-wide scan for any lingering VYRN remnants. Ruck had not returned. No one knew where it went. Tracking systems failed to register any signature. It left behind no trace, no thermal pattern, no psychic residue. Miles said nothing about their final moment. He remained silent, discharged from medical care under supervision, given clearance but watched carefully. Within weeks, his name began appearing in restricted transmissions. His actions had breached protocol, exposed weaknesses in security, and tampered with classified systems. But punishment never came. The Colony Council received an off-world transmission from the Zalarian Central Governance, a message citing extraordinary ethical precedent, suggesting Miles be transferred to their interspecies diplomatic academy for cultural integration training. The message noted that a human, unaided, had stabilized a Class 7 xenobiological threat without violence. That kind of result couldn't be ignored. He accepted. Years passed. Miles immersed himself in studies, xenohistory, first contact ethics, neurolinguistics. While others focused on diplomacy through trade or alliance, he studied behavior, deviation, the mechanisms behind choice in artificial and semi-organic lifeforms. He developed a framework for sentient deviation patterns, how beings could outgrow or reject their original function. He never spoke publicly about Ruck. The data logs were incomplete. The empathy amplifier had burned out before recording final telemetry. There was no hard evidence, just memory and the scars along his left side that no medical unit could quite explain. But he knew. One night, long after he'd graduated and taken a post with the Galactic Civil Sentience Registry, he received a pulse-coded transmission. It was buried in the raw data stream of a derelict satellite rescued from the border systems. No encryption, just a symbol, 3 vertical lines within a circle, followed by coordinates. Miles rerouted his next assignment without explanation. He found nothing at the destination. No ruins, no signal, no life. But the stars looked different there. Calmer. He lingered for a while, watching. A week later, he accessed the galactic security logs. Scattered reports described attacks on remote settlements by rogue VYRN pockets. But in each case, the settlement had already been defended before military arrived. Witnesses spoke of a black-scaled entity that moved faster than weapons could track. It left no bodies, no buildings damaged, just saved lives and silence. None of these locations matched known patrol paths. None were deemed strategic. But all were vulnerable. Forgotten. Abandoned. Miles submitted an unofficial report, *unknown agent operating beyond charted sectors. Behavior consistent with autonomous ethical actor. No threat identified, *. He signed it under a pseudonym. Back on Yeltrax 9, a monument had been erected at the colony's central plaza. 2 figures stood in alloy and stone, one human, one beast. They weren't locked in battle. They stood side by side, both facing outward. The plaque bore no names. Just one line etched beneath their feet: he fed the forgotten, and the forgotten remembered. Children asked who they were. Parents told them pieces. Most had no full story, only fragments passed down, about a boy, a predator, and a war that nearly rewrote their fate. The full truth was never codified in any official archive. But it lived. In the quiet between systems, in the corners where no patrols ventured, there were stories of a creature that fought not to conquer but to defend. No broadcast ever confirmed it. No government ever endorsed it. But when outposts under threat sent distress calls, sometimes all that answered was silence followed by survival. Miles kept watching those places. He didn't chase the stories anymore. He just listened. And when a new cadet once asked him why he studied anomalies instead of command protocols, he replied without hesitation. Because what they're made for isn't always what they choose to become.